Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Our household library is huge and ever growing. There was a time early in our marriage when we lived in a very small condo, and I was actually not allowed to purchase any more books because of space constraints. But now we have a bigger house, and it is lucky because the books, I sometimes fear, are reproducing while we sleep. The downsides are obvious. Our furniture budget is dedicated almost exclusively to bookcases. But there are good things as well. When you need something new to read, there is always something to be found. Pleasant surprises you can't recall acquiring. Some nights the girls will show up for bedtime stories with something I've never seen before or can't imagine having purchased for them. Calliope brought one such book into bed the other night. The Berenstain Bears Go to Sunday School. I don't know where it came from, actually. I probably bought it, but I don't remember when. It's in the line of new, explicitly Christian Berenstain Bears stories. Not entirely unlike the classics I remember from my childhood, The Berenstain Bears and Too Many Snacks, The Berenstain Bears Get the Gimmies, The Berenstain Bears and Mama's New Job. These were formative. In this one, Mama realizes it's been a while since the family went to church together, and she talks to her family then about how church is like the glue that holds them together and convinces them that they can go to the early service and still be done in time for soccer and ballet. The Berenstains know their audience. Once brother and sister get to Sunday school, Cousin Freddie relates the story of Noah and the Ark, everyone's favorite Bible story for children. I say that tongue-in-cheek because if you recall the story of Noah and the Ark, it is in that story that God decides to destroy the whole world for its wickedness and sends a flood to wipe humanity and everybody else out, save Noah and his family. It's super great for bedtime. Now, we encourage active reading at our house, and so I read Freddie's retelling, and Callie, age 5, turns to me and says, "Is that true? Is that true? Did that story in the Bible really happen? Did it happen like that? Would God do that?" The Bible. What a pain, am I right? And this is why we should never read the Bible with children. No, wrong. I'm kidding, of course. But it's moments like these when a little biblical knowledge can go a long way. The people who wrote these first stories in the Bible weren't there. And though tradition has it that Moses wrote Genesis, it's far more likely that there were several authors who wrote much later. In the original Hebrew, it's easier to see their different styles. One refers to the divine as God, another as Lord, a stand-in for the name of God, and a third is particularly concerned with rituals and cultural practices. In telling these stories of the origins of life in the world, these writers are concerned less with facts, with historical veracity, and more with revealing something about the nature and character of God and humanity. They are not scientists. They are suggesting why things are the way they are. We give thanks for rainbows, the storytellers write, because they remind us of God's promise to us. We give thanks that our God is not merely one who demands our fealty, but who covenants with us, who brings us new life and possibility, even out of sin or oppression. Did the flood really happen just like that? My daughter asks, and I am relieved to tell her, probably not. That's not what we know is most true about God. I feel the same relief in reading commentary on the book of Joshua, from which our scripture lesson for the morning comes. This is the sort of verse you see a great deal at Christian bookstores and at Hobby Lobby before you stopped shopping there. Stenciled on wood, suitable for hanging in the kitchen or by the front door. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But this call to commitment comes at the end of a deeply troubling book, in which, yes, the Israelites arrive at the promised land, but upon arriving find it inhabited. This is a bit of a problem. It is yours, though, the Lord tells the people, and these folks are unrighteous. So take them out. Leave no survivors. Archaeological study doesn't support this history of military domination and genocide, which is a relief. It probably didn't happen quite like that. The biblical writers telling this story centuries later arguably wrote during a time of exile, and they wrote to galvanize their people in the midst of suffering. Remember your great, slightly revisionist history. Your God brought you to a land of milk and honey, and if you are loyal, you will know such blessing again. Choose today and have hope. Reading this speech from Joshua at the end of the narrative, this choice feels a little tribalistic. Choose this national God over those gods of other people, even of your ancestors. Indeed, those who lived throughout the centuries in which the Bible was written had little doubt that there were multiple gods in the heavens. But they claimed loyalty to the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, this particular God. They claimed loyalty because they believed their God was better, had done more for them than the other national gods. You remember the story of Moses when he has his staff and the Pharaoh's gods and magicians turn their staffs into snakes, and they're like, oh, no big whoop. But Moses's God's snake eats the other snake. There's no doubting that there are other gods with powers. It's just that their powers aren't as good. Now, the choice for us, living in the 21st century with a very different metaphysics, may not be nearly so clear. Sure, we might claim to be Christians, to follow Jesus as opposed to the leaders of other faith traditions, but that choice doesn't really mirror what was at stake for those ancient people. The idolatry God calls us to turn from these days is less about removing the statue of St. Joseph from the yard of the house you're trying to sell, or even the Buddha you bought in Japan from your front hall. Choosing our household gods, the ones that order our lives and give meaning in our families, is trickier. The Berenstain Bears decide to go to church, but really only because it is convenient. It doesn't get in the way, truly, of other commitments. We're just going to go to the early service, and then we can still also give our Sunday to soccer and ballet and football. We are tasked to choose all the time. We are asked to choose all the time between faith practices and other demands. And churches, not this one alone, but churches the nation over have the chronic debate. How early can we start church and get people to get up in time to be there, but also get them out of here in time to do all these other things? There's no perfect schedule. But we're going to try one anyway, and it's going to be great. And you're all going to come. Children play sports after school and all weekend. Work gets us out of the house early in the morning and brings us home late. These are, far too often, the commitments that order our lives. These are the idols we face, these things which we have allowed to become the centers of our lives over and against our commitment to God in Jesus Christ. Materialism, achievement, business, competition, power, influence, pleasure, violence, fear, self-righteousness. We all have our favorites. A pastoral mentor of mine once said in the midst of the lengthy Methodist ordination process that everybody is called to some sort of sin in particular. Some sins are financial, some are about power, some are about sex. We all have one to which we're more drawn. Part of the trick of spiritual maturity is figuring out which tempts you most. In ways small and large, all of us make decisions day in and day out about how we will honor our faith commitments or how we will offer our honor to other things. Many families are heading back to school this week, and thus the great annual tradition of school supply shopping has begun. It is a favorite of mine. I don't think anything is more exciting than a new notebook and new pens. A friend of mine was all bent out of whack because she didn't get to buy any school supplies for herself this year, and she was like, oh man. It is a great and grand tradition. In our house, we had the question of whether or not we needed to purchase a new backpack. Did we need to get a new backpack? The one from last year still worked just fine. No zippers had busted. It wasn't dirty. It was still big enough. It was fine. Do we need a new one? And we decided we did not. We decided we did not because backpacks use resources, they cost money. Throwing away the other one would take up space in the landfill, or giving it to Goodwill. Half the stuff you give to Goodwill ends up in landfills anyway. We decided not to buy another one. But it was a point of contention. It was hard to say no. We have made this choice. We honor these other things more than acquiring something new. There was contention in our ranks. And that's just over a backpack. In ways small and large, we demonstrate what we are committed to in this life. In one family that I know of, there is a very important and yet very simple way of honoring their faith and their connection to their children. As everyone gathers together over dinner at the end of the day, they rehearse the highs and lows of their day. They talk about the things that have been wonderful, the things that brought joy, the things they were grateful for or excited about, and things that were hard. The things that made them sad, the choices that were difficult and they didn't feel like they made very well. They share the highs and lows. Each day they do this, and the ways in which that family shares in conversation and shares their life together then becomes built into their daily routine and begins to shape their lives. In ways large and small, we can show our loyalty and our commitments. Today, we have a baptism, one of the most critical ways in which we experience God's grace and God's promise to us, and a moment, too, in which families and congregations make commitments to live out our faith, to support these children in our care, to show them what it means to be a grace-filled people, to show them what it means to choose to serve God, to choose to serve our God in Jesus Christ. What are the choices before you this day? As we come to the water, we recognize that there is new life, that there is goodness, that there is hope, that there is grace everlasting. We choose to serve a God who offers us these things, who gives these things. So, as we come to the fount this day, as this family makes this commitment, as all of us offer our support to them, I ask you to choose this day and every day who you will serve. As for me and my house, we are trying to serve the Lord. Amen.